Hi everyone, my name is Richard Frank and I'm Head of Development at Flow Communications. And today I'm going to be asking the question, is your website firing on all cylinders? 5 things to check right now. So a little bit about Flow Communications. We're a communications company based in Johannesburg, South Africa, and we build websites and communication solutions for some of South Africa's leading travel organizations, attractions and hotels. We built over 100 websites, and in 2018 we're really dealing with a few very key issues in the web development space. As you well might know, your website is your most important digital asset. It is something that you own as a company. Nobody can take it away from you, unlike social media networks or other digital platforms. It is yours, and you must do the best you can to promote it online. So we have 5 areas which we think are really critical in 2018. The first, of course, which you're probably well aware of, is mobile technology and being mobile first. So on some of the websites that we work on, we are now seeing upwards of 50, 55, 60% of traffic being mobile and tablet traffic. This is incredibly a large number of visitors versus 2010, where it was around 10% of traffic. And so obviously our focus now needs to be on how we can service those mobile users effectively. It's just some stats from some of our clients from May 2018. A tour operator doing 44% mobile and 28% tablet traffic. A transport operator doing 52% mobile. So over 50% of their traffic is coming from users using mobile devices and 7% tablet. And a regional DMO, 49% mobile and 5% tablet. And we're seeing these numbers increase all the time. So it's really important that we think about our websites from a mobile first perspective, not only for the fact that our users will enjoy using the website on their mobile device, but also because Google indexes websites now from a mobile first approach. So they no longer, the crawler that crawls your website no longer uses your desktop version of your website in order to gather the data. It uses the mobile version of your website to do that. So there's no such thing as now having a separate mobile site which has different content or more restricted content. What we're finding with mobile users is that they need to see the same content on the mobile site as they see on the mobile version of the site as they see on the desktop version. And this is what we call responsive design, where we develop a website that only has one particular framework, but can then be displayed in multiple ways, either on desktop, mobile, or tablet. So Google indexing the mobile version is a big change, and it does mean that we have to focus on how our users use our mobile site. But we don't only build mobile sites for Google. We build it for users, and it's even more critical that you think about the way that you build your site using a mobile first approach. So that means looking at how your users will experience your website on a mobile site before you even consider what the desktop version will look like. And mobile first is really an important trend in web development, because it means that when we're developing our websites, we are using all of that initial energy in developing and understanding the strategy for the website from a mobile approach versus a desktop approach. So it's an important trend to follow and something that needs to be focused on. In terms of mobile first, what to do, the thing that you could do right now is just check obviously your own website on a mobile device. You could also visit the website using your colleagues' or friends' mobile phone. I really encourage that, because often people check their own websites all the time on their devices, but they don't necessarily check it on different mobile devices. And I think it's really important that we cater for the diversity of phones, whether they're iPhones or Android phones, online, and so that's really important. And of course, check that the same information is displayed on both the website and both on the desktop version of your site and the mobile version. As we've said before, there should be no distinction between those two things. The second major trend that we're seeing at the moment is that of SSL encryption. This used to be something that you would obviously you would look for the green padlock when logging onto your banking sites or e-commerce websites, but Google has been very aggressive in saying that all websites should be SSL encrypted. And again, they're the dominant search engine, and they suggest that that all websites should be encrypted by July 2018, which is really coming up. They're launching a new version of Google Chrome that actually will mark your site as insecure if you don't have an SSL certificate. So before, in the current version of Chrome, which dominates the market, over 50% of desktop users use Google Chrome. In the current market, the current released version, you can see that Google places a little grey marker next to your URL to indicate that that the site is not secure. Well, in the release coming out in July 2018, they're actually going to write the words "not secure" next to your website, and it's not a great thing for your brand. It's not a great thing for your customers. So, really, our suggestion is that that if you don't have an SSL certificate, that now's the time to get one. There are some that are freely available now, so you don't have to spend money on purchasing a certificate anymore. But you also need to check that your website is optimized for SSL, for security, because your site's content has to also all be secure. You can't have one item on the page that is coming from an insecure network or environment. So you probably would need to get some support from your web development team or digital agency to ensure that the website is fully SSL compatible, and then of course redirect all your traffic from your old HTTP addresses to HTTPS, the secure version. And once that's done, you'll be compliant, and your customers will trust your website more, and of course Google will rank you higher for having an SSL supported site. The third trend that is very important at the moment is page speed, and web developers are paying a lot of attention to this because users are incredibly fickle. If they have to wait 2 or 3 seconds for a page to load, they often click off that website and go somewhere else, and that means you get high bounce rate. So page speed is also an important factor for Google in the way that it ranks your site, which has a large impact of how many people actually visit your site, how many people search for your product or service and find you and click on that Google listing result and get to your website. So page speed is an important part of the Google ranking algorithm, and it also affects people who actually land on your site, how many of them actually convert. So how many of them actually purchase a product or inquire about your services or become active customers of yours. And that's really what we talk about when we talk about conversion and conversion ratios. This is a graph that comes from a study done in the US of a cellular provider, a mobile provider, and what their conversions rate was at certain speeds, certain page load speeds. So on the x-axis is really how long the load time takes. So this is from 1 second to 9 seconds, and the y-axis is the conversion rate. What percentage of users became customers of this particular provider? And so what we find is that at 2 second page load, you have a almost 2% conversion rate. But if you take even 2 seconds longer to load the page, you immediately halve your conversion rate. So if you think about that, you're getting 2 customers out of every 100 who visit your site, 2 customers to convert and to purchase your product or service. If you have a slightly slower page load, and the difference between 2 seconds and 4 seconds might not seem a lot, but it does result in half your customers from 2 to 1 not converting and purchasing your product or service. So it's a really critical thing to look at, and there are a variety of techniques in order to improve your page load speed or the perception of the page load speed. And some of those things is how complex the page is. So how many elements do you have on the page? And we like to pack in a lot of video and images and rich multimedia into our products and services pages, but to what detriment? So I mean, how there's got to be a balancing act between how you display your product but also how quickly the page loads so that a person may not fall off and go and look for the product somewhere else. Also, how long the web server takes to query and retrieve data from other servers. So if you've got widgets on your page, let's say a social media widget, which displays tweets from Twitter, or a weather service widget to show the current temperature at your destination, for instance. All of these queries, external queries, can take quite a long time and can reduce the page speed of your website. So when you load it, look at what it's loading and how long it's taking to load those different elements, and maybe think about ways in which you can reduce that. And then, of course, your web server location. So where do you actually host? Do you know where your website is hosted from? Is it hosted from South Africa? Is it hosted from the USA? Where's your target market? Because depending on where your target market is, you may want to move your web server closer to where your target market is. We have clients who operate and have 97% of their customers coming from the US-Europe region. So in that case, we host their website in the USA because it means that they get much quicker response times for their website. So consider that. There are also methods to distribute your website using a content delivery network. This is the kind of technology that's used by YouTube to deliver videos really quickly to people around the world. And the idea is basically that your website can be served from one location. So the web server can be based in South Africa, but copies of it are distributed around the world. So if somebody in Germany is accessing that particular web page, that they get that web page from a German server, not from your South African server. And obviously that reduces the speed, increases the speed of the website page load. Being able to load it from a closer location means that there's less jumps and less distance to travel for that data to get back to that user's computer. So content delivery networks are increasingly used by web developers, and we certainly think it's a good way to go if you've got an international audience to communicate with. So what you can do in order to determine your page speed is you can use the Google PageSpeed tool, which is available. If you just Google that, you should be able to find it. And you type in your web URL, and you will be able to get insights as to what is slowing down your website. They will give recommendations, and you can pass that on to your technical team. And some of the changes you could probably make yourselves, depending on how much you work on the website. In terms of the report, they give you a lot of analysis as an example of one page of the report, which says that the website is performing against the benchmark, it's performing average, and they give you techniques and approaches in order to improve your page load speed. The fourth thing that we're focusing on quite heavily this year is data protection, and this has to do with the GDPR regulations that came into effect in Europe on May 25th, but it also has to do with, in the South African context, with the Protection of Personal Information Act, POPI, which is coming into effect. We believe probably in early 2020 it will start to have real teeth, and so we're in the process of ensuring that all of our clients, of course, have got the correct data protection mechanisms in place in order to ensure that their customer information is kept private and is not abused. And really, just the common sense guidelines in terms of data protection is to treat your customers how you would want to be treated. So when you collect customer information, tell them what that information is going to be used for, and only use it for that. If you've got a newsletter subscribe form, tell the customer that they're going to receive a newsletter once a month, or they're going to receive regular updates, marketing updates. But be clear about why you're using that information. And when they ask you to remove their information, the unsubscribe link is a classic example in newsletter development, but it's in other areas it may be a customer phoning you and asking you to remove their information from the database. You must have mechanisms in place in order to do that, because it's their right, according to the GDPR, to have their information removed from your data storage. The third thing, a very small change, and something that we're currently doing on some of the websites that we've developed, is to change the way that we opt in or opt out of marketing communication. So in the past, we used to do this. When we had, let's say, a newsletter subscribe form, we would have a I accept new terms and conditions checkbox so that we could obviously ensure that the person had accepted the terms and conditions. And we used to obviously keep that tick box pre-ticked. So that's what you call a opt-out mechanism, because it's already ticked. The person doesn't have to do anything. They have to untick it in order to opt out. And that's a bad practice according to the latest data protection and privacy regulations. Right now, the better way of doing it is to leave that checkbox unticked, so that the person must actively opt in for that particular subscription or whatever they're signing up for. So you can also give them a little bit more of a choice as to what type of communication to provide. So if you do a monthly newsletter, but you also do occasional updates, and you do various forms of marketing, it is better practice to allow those people, the person, to select what type of communication they would like to receive and what type of communication they wouldn't. In this case, a monthly newsletter versus promotional content and information. So what you can do straight away, data protection, you can check your newsletter subscribe forms and make sure that they are compliant, that you are telling your customers what you're going to be using their information for. Check what data you're collecting in your booking forms and e-commerce. Do you need to collect all that information? The less information that you collect, possibly the better in terms of having to manage that information. So make sure that you don't collect stuff that you're not going to use. If you're never going to use the customer's phone number, then it's perhaps not a good idea to collect it, because then you have to manage it, and you have to manage that according to the regulations. And then check where and how you store the data. I would imagine a lot of people don't really consider where the data actually ends up. Where's it stored on the web server? How does it get backed up? Whose hands could that data get into? Because all of that is important from a consumer protection point of view. The fifth aspect that we're currently concentrating on is social sharing. I've said earlier, your website is your most important asset because you own your website and you're able to manage the content within that without being affected by outside parties. Social sharing is obviously an important aspect of promoting your content. So if you've got a blog or you've got a product page and you have social sharing icons like sharing on Twitter or on Facebook, you can, to a large degree, manage how that content is shared and how it's displayed on those social networks. So we can actually tell the social network through metadata and code that we add to the web page what promotional image and content that can be used by the social network. And you can often see where this is not done on websites, because the Facebook share will actually pick a random image from the page instead of the image that you think is most appropriate. And that's because it just the Facebook scraper doesn't know which particular image to use on the page. So we can tell Facebook, we can tell Twitter what images to use and what content to use to best promote your content. Don't leave it to the user to have to decide how to promote your content. Rather drive the process by managing social sharing options. And that social sharing metadata can tell Facebook, for instance, whether to use a small image or a large image in the social sharing the post that is shared by the user. So it can really have an impact on your brand. Also, the choice of image, as I've said before, making sure that the correct image is selected that will promote your product the best, rather than something else on the page that may be less relevant. And then, of course, the content with it. This is an example of a National Geographic post on Twitter, and it shows what we call a Twitter card, which again you can define. You can define exactly when they're sharing an article from your website. You can define which image to select, what summary content to display, how you would like to promote it, and obviously allow the person sharing the content to share the best possible version of your content online, rather than a random image or no image at all, which is often the case on Twitter when you share a link. So social sharing is really quite easy to get right in terms of your own website, making sure that the correct metadata is in place. Twitter also allows you to share videos and even apps using the Twitter card metadata that we add to the website. So you can go back to your web team and just test your own website, try to share a link. Does it represent your website in the best way? Does it represent the product that you're currently sharing in the best possible light? And ensure that the correct metadata code is added to the page. And if you don't have that correct code installed, you would be at risk that it could display anything and probably image that's inappropriate to the content that you're promoting. So social sharing is a large part of the web experience, and it's an important part to get right. So in terms of the checklist, these are the 5 things just as a recap. Does your website render well on mobile? Check it on your own mobile phone. Check it on some other colleagues or friends or family's mobile phones, and ensure that you're getting the best possible presentation of your content on mobile, because more of your users are now on mobile than they are on desktop. Do you have an SSL certificate? Is there a green padlock next to your website address? This is going to become more key. Google is going to get a lot more stricter on websites that are not SSL certified or encrypted. Does the website load quickly? Again, something you can test relatively easily, but I would encourage you to get people to test it in your market. So if you are servicing a European market, for instance, get people in that region to visit your site. You can also use online testers to do that from around the world to test your website from various locations. Have you complied with POPI or the relevant Data Protection Act in your particular country or jurisdiction? I think it's an area that is gaining prominence. I think customers are going to be a lot more strict in terms of giving away their information. And if they don't see that you're taking their data protection seriously, they're less likely to convert into customers. And then finally, when people share your website on Facebook or on Twitter or one of the other social networks, is it being represented well? Is it being represented the best it can be? And that really comes down to your social sharing code that you add to each page of your website. So that's the checklist. You can take it to your web development team, your digital marketing team, and just double check that those 5 things, which are, I believe, really trending strongly in 2018, are addressed on your website. So thank everyone for this presentation, and I look forward to your questions.